a very, maybe not to the depth that we might be able to help you get to today. Alphonse and I go way back. We both enjoyed distinguished careers at CU Boulder, and we both enjoyed making things possible that wouldn't have happened otherwise, particularly in the areas of student success for underrepresented groups, also for first-generation college-going students. And that evolved to all kinds of work, outreach, access for students, making it possible for populations to be at a place like the University of Colorado Boulder who might not have been there otherwise without innovative outreach, community building, and such activities. Over the years, our work extended to the entire organization, to employees, to recruitment and development, to establishing a sense of belonging, to helping departmental leaders better understand diversity, equity, and inclusion for their line of business, strategic planning as well. All of this began because of our own personal experience growing up in working class neighborhoods and communities, and being first generation college going kids ourselves, and recognizing gradually over time in high school and college that not enough people from diverse communities were included in the academic arena. I myself grew up in a large Latino family with a multi-generational history in Colorado. And so through the years, Alphonse and I have been able to build off of each other, work on national projects, and we're excited now to be taking this knowledge into different arenas, not just in higher ed and not just in the private sector, but across the board.
So, as Dave said, we've been working together for a very long time. I'm originally from New Orleans and still have a very strong connection. You cannot take New Orleans out of people from that area. I can just tell you, it's almost impossible. The work that we're currently engaged in this kind of partnership that Dave and I are displaying even today is really quite great, because we're able to move into other spaces, such as one project that we just recently did, or rather we're continuing to do, with faith-based communities down in Denver right now. But that's all we'll say about this at this point. So, but that's a little bit about us beyond that introduction and what we have to share. So Dave?
Yes. Next slide, I think.
Yeah, if it works.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. We want you to better understand the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion, including the distinctions between the three terms and how it's really the combination of all three that are a difference maker for individuals and for organizations, whatever the mission might be. Diversity in a basic sense is simply the composition, diverse groups of people representing diverse cultures, diverse races, ethnicities, genders, nationalities, rural, urban perspectives, age, you name it. It's really the composition of people with different points of view and life experiences. But that in itself doesn't take you to the promise of all three combined together. Equity relates to not just opportunities, but the access to opportunities. Who is getting the opportunity to take on more responsibility? Who is getting the opportunity for increased professional development? Who is getting the opportunity to be mentored, to move forward in the organization? So it's ensuring equality of access to opportunities to succeed and to make positive contributions. Inclusion, it's one thing to be a part of an organization where you represent a distinct subculture or a distinct life experience or point of view. But unless you have the opportunity to be your full self in the workplace, then you're not contributing from your full self. And so the combination of diversity, equity, and inclusion is that, yes, we are open and involving and engaging people from all walks. We are being attentive to, the growth and development of all people. And we're welcoming full voice, that everybody bring their full selves. And so I think this is why companies and organizations and employers are getting more involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So one of the things that we've used in talking about those three particular terms, and there are a few others, but those are the principal ones that you hear about currently in the world, especially in the United States, as well as in other parts of the world. I happen to travel to South Africa, or I used to before the pandemic, and the same topic is very much a part of the discussion there as it is in Europe as well. So what this illustration is trying to do is really make sense of why we use the word equity versus the term equal. There is a difference. And so this illustration, which we typically use in the educational setting, but it still applies here. If you look at the first frame there, we're looking at the reality of what we have in our American society. There are people who have opportunities that are well above many, many others. And so they get to participate. And in this kind of illustration of watching a baseball game, they can watch the game from the full vantage point on every way possible that you could see the field and what's happening, even with spectators and the like. And so they're up high up on those different boxes. And then you have the next kid, if you will, who is just barely able to see across the fence, but is able to see the game, is able to participate. And that's a situation that we have for some people who are able to get by and make sure that they're able to participate. And then we have that last kid down in the ditch, if you will, in the dugout of sorts, and is not able to see over the fence, is not able to participate in what's happening across that fence, and the idea that there's even a baseball game that's taking place, if you will. Well, okay, so that's where we're saying, many people are saying, who are in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we usually shorten by saying DEI. But then the next frame shows this notion of equality. We think that the way equality is achieved is by having everybody on the same box, that's really what is necessary to do. If you put everybody on the same box, then we say that they're equal, but that's not true. If you look at it, we see that the person who was well above on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 boxes over there is able to still see the game and appreciate it. The person is even taller. And then we have the kid who was always able to stand on the same box, but the kid who was in the dugout is still unable to see. That's how some people think about what equality is, that you start with the same level of offer, if you will. Now there's a reason that kid is in the hole in that first frame under the reality. And even with the attempt to say, well, let's make everything equal, it still doesn't bring the kid up to the point that he's able to actually enjoy the game. And that has to do with a long, long history. And we're not going to go into that now. That's something you may have heard the word systemic, and that's what that term is looking at, that long history that has not allowed some people to advance to the point that you see in that first reality frame. So the effort towards equality is not really getting us to the point where everybody is able to participate in the game, in this instance, the baseball game. And then what we're trying to pay attention to is this notion of equity, where everybody's able to participate in the game. You know, even the kid who was in the dugout is able to joyously raise his hands and say, yay, and vote, enjoy what's happening on the field with everybody. And even the kid who's next to him is sort of enjoying the fact that this kid is enjoying it. And then the guy who had lots of other opportunities and advantages is also able to participate and enjoy the game together. That's the equity piece. It's the one that's trying to not only address equality, but making it an equitable situation for all to be able to participate. And then lastly, the last frame here is looking at what if we remove the entire fence, that there is no barrier whatsoever for all to be able to participate. And that frame is referred to, as you see here, as liberation. So the real point of this particular little illustration is to say that equity is the goal these days, rather than trying to look at equality, where some people still aren't able to make it as well as we'd like to. We'd love to, later on in this presentation, talk about how that works in the workplace, in the way in which some people are able to advance, as Dave was saying earlier, about the term, and bring their full selves to the workplace. But this is one of those ways to get this across. At some point, we'll probably invest in an illustrator and do this with adults, with adult kinds of features, if you will. So the term equity is the point of this particular piece, and especially as it relates to the workplace, not just where we're looking at people starting off to be able to enjoy something, but to look at the way in which they're able to move forward in the workplace.
One of the ways to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and how it's becoming more important in the workplace is to consider where we are at with our intergenerational workforce. We actually have 5 generations in the workplace, more than ever in our history. For the sake of simplicity, I've listed 3 here: the baby boomers, the millennials, and then Generation Z. And I just wanted to share with you how the people who make up the workplace are changing. We're going from a position of, in previous decades, having much more of a singular culture kind of represented in the workplace, a dominant culture with very little representation from other groups, to a younger workforce that's made up of a lot of different cultures and life experiences and beliefs. And so in general, with our older generations, there is some awareness about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But a lot of the experiences around that have been more kind of one-dimensional. It's largely been about race and ethnicity, or certainly about gender. Whereas today, it's about a lot of different things. With the millennials, we've seen greater awareness and more acceptance around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But then with the youngest generation, those that are currently newest in the workforce or preparing to enter the workforce, diversity is a lot broader. It goes beyond race and gender, and we see a lot of embracing of non-fixed boundaries. And so it's very different than older generations. And so, for example, one element, even with regard to race and ethnicity in Colorado, are you aware that in Colorado, 40% of high school graduates today are coming from races and genders that are diverse, that are communities of color, from our African American, Latino, Latinx, Asian American, American Indian populations. 40% of high school graduates in Colorado are from those groups and entering the workforce.
In fact, with regards to that Gen Z group, that's a group I'll be talking to in the class that I'm teaching this afternoon, that I teach on Tuesday, Thursdays at the university. And it's really going to be an interesting discussion about interesting things related to who they are and the way that the different components of their identity are activated. So anyway, so Dave mentioned the intergenerational. We want to show you yet another way in which to see this. Here are the 5 generations, millennials, there should be a second N in millennials, but don't worry about that. If you look at the data that we got from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on employment, it shows the generations that are still a part of the workforce these days. That was as of 2020. If you look at the guide to the right here, if you see my mouse as a cursor, you see that there are traditionalists born in 1925 to 1945, and then the boomers from 46 until 64, and Gen Xers that 1965 to 1980, and millennials who are talked about a great deal, and they represent that 1981 to 2000, and then the current generation, the 2001 to 2020.
Alphonse,
Yes.
your audio is breaking up a little bit. I don't know why.
Thank you. Let's see. So how does this work? Is it better now?
A little bit. I think we can understand you. Just breaking up a little bit, just or crackly.
Yeah, scratchy or crackly is how I'd say it.
Gordon here, it's like you've got another browser app that's eating your web audio. Zoom will give you a little notice on the screen if it thinks that's what it is.
Okay, so let me try this now and see how that works for everybody.
That's great.
That's much better.
Okay, good.
Excellent.
Have my AirPods in, and glad you mentioned that to me. So I hope you heard me earlier about talking about the legend there of the traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Z, if you got that. And now if you look to the left of the screen, on the left side of the screen, we see how many of traditionalists are still in the workplace, and then how many boomers as of 2020 that were still in the workplace. And then we look at the millennials and the people who are emerging, coming in. I'm sorry, we had Gen X and then millennials. The Gen Zers are beginning to be present in the workplace as well. And so as you see at the very top of this left-hand side, that there are more people, there are fewer traditionalists in the workplace, but there are more young people coming into the workplace of that Gen Z. The largest group in 2020, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, was the group of millennials, if you will, the group that's oftentimes mentioned in terms of the workplace. So this is when Dave mentioned that we have 5 generations in the workplace, which is a new fact that we've had so many different generations. I don't want to speak too much about this, but in the project that Dave and I have been working on, one of the questions that we're using is to try to get a sense of who's with this client that we have and who's of which generation. So we're trying to continue to track this aspect of what's happening in the multi-generational workforce and going from there. So this is our reality currently, if you will. Moving right along.
So certainly with the occurrence the last 2 years, the George Floyd tragedy, many organizations have been asking themselves, what are we doing to contribute to systemic injustice, to alleviating it, to addressing it? How are, as an employer, we are working with lots of people who are connected to extensive communities. And so what's really important for a lot of people is, well, how do we know diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't just a fad once again? And so we have some data here from researchers that help us to see business professors, entrepreneurship researchers, social psychology researchers, and they're demonstrating through their studies that companies who place an emphasis on DEI, who have strong climates that support diversity in their workforce, employees have more job satisfaction and higher levels of trust. We also see that companies with representation in the professional ranks, they're better able to meet the needs of customers and markets that are made up of diverse clientele. You know, the National Football League is actually kind of an interesting example, even though it represents, you know, sports and the male athlete. The representation of the African-American population is 70% plus in the professional athlete ranks. And so the organization has come to partner with community projects that are making a difference in addressing injustice. There's lots of examples like that, and they vary across industries. So understanding your customers is really becoming a driver for DE&I. And robust programs make a difference so that employees at all levels are better able to bring their whole selves. Companies with higher diversity in their management, higher levels of diversity on their boards, and in their executive level positions, as a whole, they seem to demonstrate this capacity to generate more revenue than companies with lower diversity. Organizations in the top 25% of gender diversity in their executive leadership are demonstrating that they're 21% more likely to be profitable. They're better at creating value as a business entity. Their eyes are focused on the longer term objectives of their mission and how their workforce needs to complement and work in concert with that.
So, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So now we're going to share with you something by a person who pays attention to the future of work. She's a strategist, someone that we were able to bring to the university. And we're only going to play a segment of this particular presentation that she did. And her presentation was just chock full of really good data. But this segment we think might be of some value as to why DEI is making the presence in the workplace of today and probably into the future. Okay, let's see if I can actually get this to work. Oh man, you got to log in order to do it. Sorry about that. Oh no.
Say PricewaterhouseCoopers does an annual CEO survey. I think they're on number 22 or 23 of those. They ask 3,000 something CEOs all over the world and say,
We can hear it, but we can't
looking
see
at your
it.
business, the talent that drives your business, what are the skills that are most important on one axis, and then how
Yeah, we're seeing PowerPoint.
Okay.
You might have to unshare and then share again and select the video.
I don't want us to stay unfocused. So if you don't mind, I'll just ask you to listen to it.
are they to find? So not surprising, digital skills, STEM skills, risk management, they make the quadrant. But what I think is really interesting is the skills that are hardest to find, what they call the skills battleground, is collaboration, problem solving, leadership, adaptability, creativity, and innovation. None of those are technical skills. Those are all uniquely human skills. And the other thing that's interesting is since they made this, I think this is about 2 years old. Then they tracked that list and said, how important are these skills to you? And they went from number 5 to number 3. So they're moving up the list and
Alphonse, for some reason, the sound is weird.
All righty, y'all. Gonna go back to what it was before.
STEM skills and technical skills went from 1 and 2 to 6 and 8. And flexibility, agility, adaptability, time management, prioritization, collaboration, working effectively in teams went from 4, 5, and 6, or 4, 5, and 7 to 1, 2, and 3. Effective communication went down a little bit, creativity and innovation up, ethics and integrity up. I expect ethics and integrity to skyrocket up in the next version of it. Analytics and acumen went down, and foreign language skills just dropped to number 11 or 12. So something really interesting is happening here is that the more we lunge at technology and the more of our economy is digitized, the more important human skills become. Someone, maybe in this audience, sent me an email, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, said, you're speaking at my university tomorrow, can you please speak about the liberal arts? So between this and the next few sections, I hope I'm doing you justice. Another thing that's emerging that was once just an HR strategy, which is racial and ethnic diversity and inclusion, is now a business strategy. If you have greater racial and ethnic diversity in your company, you have 35% greater returns. If you have greater gender diversity, you have 15 greater returns. 1 female board member increases ROI and net income. And diverse teams are superior at problem solving. To me, that's sort of intuitive. But we don't plan for it, and I'm going to talk about some work Google has done looking at teams. But diversity in teams allows you to check your blind spots. It's that simple. It's not an HR nice to do strategy anymore. It's a good business strategy. So I spoke earlier about women in the workforce. We are more of the bachelor's degrees awarded. We are an increasing percentage of the profession, even it's really only been 40 or 50 years. But we are an abysmal percentage of the leadership, and I expect that to change. But let's explain why that might be happening. So we tell boys that their schoolwork is good enough in primary school, and we tell girls to be perfect. And there's a 30-year study on this that looked at how girls' GPAs are going up and boys' GPAs are shadowing it. And then when it gets to work, a man will go from a promotion when he has 60% of the skills. A woman will wait till she has 100%. And this comes out of 2 different HR studies. And in one of them, one of the HR individuals actually admitted, we hire men for potential, we hire women for accomplishments. And I speak to a lot of HR groups, so I shame them with this all the time. Do you know the Dunning-Kruger effect? If you don't, it's really simple. On this axis is confidence, and on this axis is competence. So the least competent you are, the more confident you are, because you don't know what you don't know. And we've seen that played out, right? Okay. Not stepping any further into that. And then as your competence grows, your confidence drops, because you're like, wow, I don't know what I don't know, I don't know what I know. Oh, I know a little more, I know a little more. Oh, I got it. And so it looks like this. And Dunning-Kruger came up with that. There are 2 psychologists from Yale, I don't know, maybe in the 90s. And then since then they said, well, we want it, Dunning in particular of the 2. Dunning said, I want to understand why this confidence gap happens with women. So he came up with a fairly simple exercise. He took 3,000 executives and he said, and they were all different backgrounds, so nobody had an advantage on this. He said, I'm going to give you a scientific reasoning test, 10 questions. But before I do that, on a scale of 1 to 10, tell me how good you think you are at this. Males said, out of 10, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being good, in the 7s. Women in the 5s. So there's the gap already in perception. This is before performance has taken place. Then they all take the quiz, and then he says to them, based on your results, which they have not seen yet, do you want to enter this into a competition? 71% of the men said, oh yeah, absolutely. And 49% of the women did. Because we're codifying a confidence gap. And we have to figure out how to fix this. I presented some of this information at a large hotel chain, and there was the highest level person in the audience with whom I spoke was a woman. She came up to me and she said, I do that. I said, excuse me? She said, I do that. I have a son, I have a daughter. When my son comes home with an 85, I thought, well, that's good enough. He was probably tired from football. When my daughter comes home from an 85 and she also does sports, I said, why didn't you do better? And she said, and I know that it was partly because I know how hard I had to work to get the position I had, so I thought I was making things harder for her so she'd be ready for the same climb, but I just realized I'm codifying a confidence gap and a competence bonus in my son.
So I'm going to stop it there. I'm sorry. Let me move this. Then get back to this. I hope that you were able to pick up the points that she was trying to make about the way in which this is changing and becoming a part of the future of work, and the way in which it's no longer about something that's nice that HR is doing for more employee engagement, but rather it is an actual business strategy that more and more organizations are getting into. And then her point, which is similar to what Dave was talking about, the value of DEI for different corporations or businesses is really beginning to show itself in various ways. And so there is a return on the investment in what's going on with regard to DEI.
And so just to speak a little bit more about the way in which many companies, it certainly hasn't hit everybody, but many companies are doing a more authentic approach to DEI than they've ever done in the past. In the same way that especially big corporations are trying to create cultures whereby people can be comfortable with the fact that they don't know everything and they've got to figure things out, they're applying those same values to DEI. And they're doing it in a way that maybe is more integrated. In other words, some companies maybe have a token effort, but other companies are being more strategic. They're being more systemic. They're looking at how can we advance diversity, equity, inclusion at the executive leadership level? How do we define key performance indicators that allow us to know that we're making progress from year to year? Are we involving members from diverse groups on our board of directors? Are we bringing in consultants? Do we have a DEI executive council, a leadership council that helps us with internal perspectives and external perspectives? How are we engaging our employees? Is there a sense of belonging in our corporate culture?
Dave,
Yes.
for a second, Gordon has his hand up.
Are we doing comments in the middle or holding them for the end?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I want to point out to everybody Alphonse's audio of the movie. The very beginning of it, she was talking about a PricewaterhouseCoopers CEO multi-year study. And you can research that on the web. It's really good stuff. Also, this whole presentation, there's a sales point that's coming across. And that is, I don't know if you've ever looked at the balance sheet or the income statement of a company, but the single largest expense is payroll. You've got them there, like all our pictures and names in this meeting. How do you get the absolute most out of them? And an awful lot of life, an awful lot of business is research and development. I don't want 5 or 10 copies of me on a Tiger team. I need diverse people. It's that one little insight that comes from culture or experience that turns the tide. It's like the Mulan thing of one single grain of rice can tip the scale. That's what this is about. It's embracing the physics of the physical, emotional, rational, who we are and what we're doing. And I'll get more on that later, but this is great. Thanks for everything. That's all I wanted to interject.
That's a wonderful contribution, Gordon. And I think people on some fronts, they're becoming more savvy to the fact that members of subordinate groups, members of groups that are sometimes overlooked, because they have to operate with a bicultural lens, they have insights that are unique, that are enriching. How can we as organizations leverage that? How do we bring more belonging to our employees so that they're voicing what they see, their insights, their experience, and we're benefiting from that. And so companies are also looking at their external relationships. You know, in the area of supplier diversity, for example, a best practice is are we going to provide us our raw materials? Is there an opportunity for us to go to, you know, a minority owned organization, veteran owned organization, women owned organization, maybe even help them in growing their business and succeeding while meeting our needs? There's increased attention to corporate social responsibility. You know, it may not be the perfect time for all of this to change, but it's important to take advantage of the time and move forward as we can.
So,
If I could interject real briefly, somebody in the chat had mentioned that she thought the talk was very interesting, and she's wondering if there's any way to gain access to the whole talk.
we're recording, right?
Oh, do you mean the Heather? I think she means the Heather McGowan.
Oh,
Right.
oh, the Heather McGowan piece. I'm not sure because I had to log into the university to be able to see it. So I'm not sure, but she does have something on YouTube currently. Somebody might be able to search that while we finish up the presentation, but I don't know if it's the exact same presentation as what she did for us up on campus.
Is there a month and a year to that conversation with Heather?
Was it a year ago?
Yeah, I'd say 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago.
And what about a month?
I don't know that you're going to be able to find that particular one, but I think there's multiple ones online on YouTube, maybe even TED Talks by Heather McGowan, The Future of Work.
Okay. So we're getting close to the end of our time. So I'm going to turn to my buddy and ask him how he would like to, before he has to depart, how he would like to finish this up.
Yeah, I need to step out in about 3 minutes, but I just want to open it up for discussion and allow anybody to contribute to the conversation, because each of you have diverse experiences. You may know very well what it's like to be a member of a subordinate group in some setting or another, whether it's the personal sphere or the professional sphere. And so just like to open it up and also give opportunity for us to talk about how this can help us even in interviewing and being able to speak to questions that might come up about diversity, equity, and inclusion, should that happen.
While we're about to go into just discussion, I'm going to show you all the sources just for the recording that we're doing, so that if you want to actually investigate some more of these, other than what Gordon pointed out, here are the references for that information, so that you can go from there, just to see how this is playing out. Okay, so I'm going to end the PowerPoint share and bring us all back up so we can talk to each other. There we go. So the floor is now open for questions, comments, pursuing anything that we may have presented, etc. I'm actually I'm comfortable with silence.
I'll comment. I have 3 comments, and the first was about your intergenerational workforce slide and the space between. Well, anyway, there's no disrespect intended. I know you've done your research, but I thought, well, wait, this doesn't include the boomers and the in between boomers and what's the next one? Xers who are valuing diversity, their whole careers. And so that leads into, I'm a special education teacher. I've worked with kiddos with disabilities for most of my career. And so what I've done is to work with them to become part, to build skills, to be able, personal and technical, to be able to become part of a workforce. And we're talking elementary level kids. Okay, let's look ahead at how you can succeed in life and in the workforce as a person who has a quote unquote disability or with challenges. And then that goes into the personal story, which is now I'm an over 55 woman. And I can tell you that there is ageism and there is, the gender piece. And when I walk into an interview, I've got strikes against me as an older woman that I really thought I would be immune because I'm a young, older woman, always have been. And so just wanted to say those comments. Jim has his hand up.
I'm just saying goodbye to Dave.
Yes, enjoyed seeing everybody. Enjoy visiting with Dr. Keasley.
Bye, Dave. Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Dave.
See you.
Bye.
Talk to you later, Dave.
See ya.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your comments. One of my specialties is that I'm an audiologist by training. So I've worked with people who are deaf and hard of hearing as a part of my life. And so your point is well taken about looking at individuals whom we did not mention as a part of this whole diversity inclusion effort. In fact, people with disabilities are in fact a part of the outreach. There have been some really wonderful presentations on, 60 Minutes, I think did one with regard to people who are on the autism spectrum. There are certain jobs in which we know that certain people who are deaf, who can work in very deafening environments and the like. Now, with regard to your point about something that we didn't talk about in this presentation, it's called intersectionality. And that's one of the slides right after we had the different generational pieces there, looking at things from traditionalists all the way up to Gen Zers. We are quite well aware, those of us who work in this field, that we don't think about people as a single identifier, but rather we have salient identifiers, those aspects of ourselves which are more important than others. So one person might speak about race, somebody might speak about gender, and someone might speak about ability. But there may be others who think about themselves in other ways that are important. And that's what we refer to by intersectionality. It's a complicated concept, but your point is well taken about the way that you're seeing yourself as a younger, older woman in the workforce, if you will. Absolutely. This was really more of the ground level piece. Jim has heard this presentation now a couple of times, and then there's a second version that we have that we tried to do, but we did the very first one today, if you will. Other comments, questions?
This is Jim Alphonse, and I'm just curious if you just kind of in an overall sense for the American business, how would you grade us, so to speak, on where we are today? And do you see the trend towards acceptance increasing?
Yeah, Dave made that reference when he talked about the George Floyd situation, that since then, there has been a lot of effort by different companies And what we're seeing in the DEI specialty area is whether or not businesses, corporations are maintaining that interest that they expressed right after the George Floyd murder. So there is still some work. There's some people who are backing off. You may have heard about some, like Netflix has donated a tremendous amount of money. Apple is also very much invested. So many of the larger corporations are definitely involved with bringing about or making good on their promises right after that event in May 25th, 2020. Yes. So yes, there is still, but there's some slipping back, if you will. It's not all corporations are still as fervent in their efforts as they were right after that situation back up in Minneapolis. Did that answer your question, Jim? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and I just sense that, with even in the political landscape, a lot of these things, there's interaction and impact on a lot of areas of society as a result. And unfortunately, it takes a tragedy sometimes to highlight that. But I just have the sense that things are moving the right direction. I have the sense with my own children and their people and young people that I work with that things are headed the right way.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks. Any other question? Yes, Gordon.
I'll yield. I've already talked some.
Was there somebody else? Oh yeah, there you go. Is it Hari?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Alphonse. And Dave's not here anymore, but thank you both for this great presentation. I guess it's kind of a comment and a sort of clarification question. Did I understand correctly that the fact that there are 5 generations in the workforce right now is helping to maybe accelerate the process into more inclusive work environments because of the influence that all these generations have on each other? Is that something that one could surmise out of that, or is there data on that? I'm just kind of curious about that, the impact of all of those generations working together and on, just move into being more inclusive and having more equity and all that.
The quick answer there, Hari, is yes. But I'd love to say much more if you all will indulge me. Okay, so here goes. This is really interesting. The reason that Dave and I actually included that intergenerational component was to say, when you look at the way certain people, young people were educated, they were paying attention to say, like when we're talking about baby boomers, we were just focused on diversity. Just the diversity aspect of it. And usually that was in a binary kind of way. It was looking at whether you were Black or you were white. Well, that's now since expanded across generations as well as within the category of race. The same holds true with gender. Gender is no longer looking at just male, female, but we're looking at trans as well as in terms of how that's all developing. So that brought those boundaries that we mentioned on that one slide that Dave had there. That's what we're saying. We're expanding those boundaries. And it has a lot to do with that which young people have been exposed to and are comfortable with. I think it's really fascinating when I look at it from like what I'm going to be doing later when I'm doing class this afternoon at 12:30. I can't wait to say, guess what I did earlier today? And I'll talk about you guys, not in any kind of detailed way, but this will be interesting because I think they would be surprised by the fact that such a presentation was being done and the way that presentation or this presentation is being received, if you will, to a certain extent. But there is an assumption in this young group, this group of 18 to, I think they're, yeah, I have an older student, 18 to 21-year-olds that, oh, I thought this was already settled, and it's not. But they're going to be bringing that sense of themselves from their educational experiences into the workplace. So to go back to your question, your original question is, yes, the generations are changing because of exposure and a willingness to understand, and that's continuing to expand into all aspects of who we are as a people in the United States of America. It's a big deal as far as I'm concerned. As one who's still in the educational arena, this is a big deal. Yes, Gordon.
Alphonse, this is Sharon.
Okay, Sharon.
I know somebody's probably already asked you this, but are you sharing the presentation material, the slides?
It's come up a few times there, Sharon.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good. It sounds like it's worthwhile. People are very interested. So let's see, it was Trent and Gordon and Don. If you guys want to make it available, it sounds like people are interested. So it's being recorded there, Sharon.
Excellent. Okay, I mean, I know it's recorded, but the
slide deck, itself.
We're going to try to get the deck
okay
on the website. Give us a while.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
yeah, you may not be able to actually watch the video, but you can try. I doubt that you'll be able to get into the university website. Go ahead, Gordon.
So everybody in this meeting right now, I think you need to realize the incredible power of what we're talking about. In job search and in business, let me see if I can divine the key points of the future. Your challenges are not going to be with hardware. They are not going to be with software. The issues are all going to be in the liveware, making the connection, making it happen, solving the challenge. And you guys said problems, and I used to put on my resume, world-class problem solver. And then I was advised by counsel, you realize that means in the person's mind you're talking to, they have a problem. And it's really challenge solving. And that's how important the words are. You can grab a dictionary and it's got every word, and I don't know them all. I don't understand them all. But what are we really doing with our lives? We're training those words together into sentences, and we're making a point. And this is it. This is the future and capability of humanity. What you're really doing with me, it's not the hardware I invented. It's not the software I invented. It's the teams. That's how crucial this is. And there's some deep, powerful history to this that a lot of people don't even know about. All the way back to Aristotle. He said about democracy, you know, if people are in any way equal, they consider themselves absolutely equal. Well, how are we equal? We're all going through time together, and we're hopefully all equally free. And because we're equally free, we are absolutely equal. And if that doesn't come out in a meeting, in a team, in a company, in humanity, we're not embracing the facts and realities around us. And we're just tying ourselves from the beginning. Now, my dad was in psych, so I know all sorts of terms like family of origin and family of creation. But this is heavy stuff. This is good stuff. This is an edge. And that's the sales point. How am I going to make this an edge for my interview, for my company, for my challenge solving, for the human race? And so thanks an awful lot, Alphonse.
Let me build on this for a second, and then we'll see if there are other points that to be made. So Mark shared with Dave, Mark Lauterberg shared with Dave how an individual from the other network had an interview. And in that interview, the interviewer raised a question about DEI. Didn't say what DEI was to the person from the group. And because that member of the other network had been in this presentation, he was able to actually respond to it. The interviewer didn't say at all what DEI was. That's why we included in this presentation so that you'll have a somewhat, I mean, you'll get to, once you have the deck, you'll get to understand what the differences are about today's discussion on this topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That there is, the world is moving forward, as Gordon is pointing out, and others are pointing out as well, that we really are in a space and time right now, not just in the US, which is why I express things about what I pay attention to in South Africa as well as in England. Those are the two places that I travel to on a regular basis, or did before the pandemic. So this really is important to do. This is just an introductory, a very low level introduction. So I shared that story that Mark has shared with Dave to say, even if it's just this basic information that we're sharing is of any value, we hope that it will allow you to at least engage a conversation during an interview about this. Yes, we know that things are changing, for instance, with regard to what businesses are doing. Going back to Jim's question, we know that there are more and more businesses that are trying to get involved in certain kinds of ways. So I'll shut up on that point for right now.
Does anybody have added questions for Alphonse? What class is that you're teaching currently?
It's a course in the honors program on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's exactly what the topic is. And the topic for today's, and it's run like a seminar, the topic of today is a reading by a psychologist. Her name is Beverly Daniel Tatum, on Who Am I? And it's looking at just these kinds of matters, if you will. So this is going to fit in beautifully. And then the other part of today's class is about the cycle of how we all got socialized. What that socialization process has been for each and every one of us. And so we're doing what the university does. We're sort of breaking it down so that young learners in the university are coming to know things, not just in some global sense, but in greater specificity, so that they really can be conversant about these matters and think about it. And what on the first day of class, and I'll shut up after this, the first day of class, the first day of discussion, which is last Thursday, the students were a little surprised that their ideas were really going to be entertained. And it's not like it was that I was going to sit there and preach at them, but rather engage them to discuss and to be confused and to try to work out of the confusion. It's my favorite way of doing the classroom. I'm one of those, the expression that we have in education, higher education especially, I'm more of a sage, I'm sorry, I'm a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage.
So Alphonse, is that course or the seminar or session that you're teaching, is that elective? Is it optional? Is it required?
It's optional. When I first wrote the course back in 1994, I wanted to try to make it a requirement. And the campus has struggled with trying to make it a requirement. But in any case, I'm glad to be teaching in honors still. So that's where I started it. And that's what I continue to do.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that an in-person class at the present?
So, what was the first part of that question?
Is that an in-person class or a online?
We will start meeting next Tuesday in person. I'm scared witless, but I will be there.
And Alphonse, is that class kind of from a psychological, sociological perspective, or from a business, kind of what environment or application kind of perspective is that held in?
Well, it's okay. So first of all, the honors program is different from our disciplines like business, whether it's accounting or whatever. It's much more interdisciplinary. So I draw from, when I wrote the course, I drew from lots of different backgrounds, academic backgrounds, in order to put it together. The application is why it's run more as a seminar. So students can take it into their discipline to be able to apply concepts. So even if I had students, well, and I have students who are in medicine, which is where this information is definitely going to apply. I have students who have been in business school where there's also going to be that case. I mean, our lead school of business on campus is very much interested in this topic. That's why they got $35 million from the Leeds family in order to have social responsibility. I mean, these things are being embraced. And, sorry, lost my AirPod there. And that the students get to apply it in their disciplines. So, but again, I love the fact that I get to teach it as an honors course where it's more seminar based rather than me telling them things, rather for them to discover, to think about and discover, and how it applies in their lives.
That sounds like a fascinating class and a very worthwhile class. Steve, did you have something?
I did. I'm sorry. Yeah, I unmuted too early, but this is kind of a wider net, Alphonse. But I was just wondering, since you're looking at the different generations and things like that, the big resignation or the big quit and that's happened in the last year, I don't see baby boomers are the ones that are running out the door. So can we talk about that and how that works with DEI and things like that? Or just, is there more opportunities and people are just going after those things, or are they just creating their own opportunities? I know it's not really where you were going, but just from the university side, what do you think?
And this really fits with the Heather McGowan piece. I'm really sorry that we couldn't do a better job of showing that to you. Once I figure that out, maybe organizers, I'll see if there's a way for me to just come back and show just that segment if you can't find it. But going to your question, and Steve, this is going to be a Keasley conjecture. What I'm talking about today in class in terms of the way we were socialized, if we think about the way we were brought up, those of us who are in the boomer generation, it was, I don't know how many of you had the experience of when you turned 18, the expectation was that you were expected to get out there and get a job. That was the socialization. That's how we were built to be in the workplace. So each generation, I mean, if you look at what we do with Gen Zers, we're not nearly as tough on Gen Zers as we were, say, on those earlier generations, the traditionalists, or any of those early generations. So we've been socialized in a way to be a part of the workforce. I would love to see, and I may actually go do this to find out who's a part of this great resignation, generationally, who is a part of it? Is it across all generations, or is there a preponderance someplace?
Right. And what was the catalyst?
Yeah,
because
yes.
It wasn't just COVID, and it wasn't just the protests and things like that, and it wasn't all these other opportunities that were aligning themselves. There's something much deeper. But I just, when I watch the news and read articles and things like that, no one's really touching it. They're just saying it's happening.
Well, I'll give you one thing that I learned from, let's see, this would have been 5 years ago. I also teach in our leadership studies program. And the students in that class, they were very much interested in the work that's been done about authentic leadership, where authentic leadership is emphasizing the greater value aspects. And so there are young people who are really seeking workplaces where it aligns with their values. Mm-hmm. And it's not like we just take a job just to have a job. It's not like we just suffer through what we just have to suffer through. No, there are places where young people, Gen Zers in this instance, who want, and some millennials, who want to be in a place where they can say, I value working at this company or with this startup or whatever. It is a shift that I was beginning to see and hear from my students, say some 5 or 6 years ago, about not just wanting to take a job just wherever. It was where they could see that their values, that the organization was also in keeping with the values that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
watch out, guys, that you don't assume that the Great Resignation is some sort of stop work. We don't know how many of those people are starting their own companies to just do it their way.
Yep. So
No, I don't think so either. I think it's also, I think it's people who are just taking a look at their lives and saying, I want to do something that's going to make a difference, or I want to make a change. And, you know, life is too short, and are taking the leap. But I would just like to kind of know what fields are they leaping from, and where are they leaping to, and what success are they having, or what challenging are they having? I just want more information. So go deeper.
Sociologically, this sort of thing has happened in the world before. Like when Great Britain got to the point of losing its colonies. It had a lot of money. It retreated into itself in a great deal, and a lot of other people went across the world. Okay. The United States has a track record of reinventing itself instead of ever retreating. So it's going to be a different scenario with the United States not pushing their kids to get a job at 18 than it was for, say, Great Britain.
yeah, Lauren, by the way, I started mowing yards when I was 14, and eventually ended up working in a little restaurant and got 45 cents an hour. Even back then, that was ridiculous. It wasn't right. Anyway, you all, I would love to continue this discussion, but I will have to get ready for my class. But we'll try to, Dave and I will get the information that we can, like the slide deck, to you. And if there's a way to get you to that presentation we had with Heather McGowan, we'll see what we can do. But I don't know that it's going to be available. Yes,
so
Gordon?
Alphonse, in California, Cal State, you could have continuing education. You could go get a student ID and audit classes. How easy is that at CU?
If
Can
you're
we
50,
come sit in the back of your class?
no, it's limited. I would love to have you. It would be such an amazing interaction across generations. I would love that. But it ain't gonna happen there, Gordon,
Well,
because
maybe you should invite me as a lab specimen.
okay. I've enjoyed this, everybody.
Thank you.
I hope that it was
Thank you,
worthwhile.
Alphonse.
Good luck with your
Thank you,
class.
Alphonse.
That was great.
Appreciate
All
it.
righty. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Wow.
I was gonna